The unthinkable insult. Hook. It was a warm, sunny afternoon in a quiet suburban park. Families were out enjoying their weekend. Children ran around playing tag, while others sat on benches under the shade of the large oak trees. Everything seemed peaceful, until one woman's voice broke through the calm, carrying words that would shock everyone nearby. Janelle, a woman in her mid-30s, was sitting with a small group of friends near the park's picnic tables. Her tone was loud and confident, as though she enjoyed the attention her opinions brought. She was known for her sharp words, always ready to speak her mind, often without thinking about the consequences. But today, she had crossed a line. "I just don't get it," Janelle said, tossing her hair back as she spoke. "Why do people praise soldiers like that? Black soldiers fighting for a country that doesn't even care about them. What's so heroic about that?" Her voice was filled with bitterness and disgust. The words came out carelessly, and she didn't seem to notice how the group around her shifted uncomfortably. A few people looked down, trying to avoid eye contact, unsure whether they should step in. But Janelle didn't care. She was on a roll, convinced that her opinion was the only one that mattered. "I mean, let's be honest here," she continued, oblivious to the tension growing in the air. "They're just throwing their lives away for a country that never gave them a chance. It's not like anyone really cares about them once they're gone." Her words hung in the air like an unpleasant cloud, heavy and cold. Some people glanced around nervously, hoping someone would speak up. But no one did. It seemed like Janelle had somehow convinced everyone to stay silent, either out of fear or disbelief. As she continued, more people in the park started to notice. A few parents with their children slowed their walks, overhearing the hateful words being spoken. Others exchanged worried looks, wondering how long it would take before someone stood up to her. But no one did. Janelle, meanwhile, sat back in her seat, feeling proud of herself for speaking so freely. She had always thought that people respected her for being bold, even if her opinions were controversial. What she didn't realize was that today, her words were about to have consequences she couldn't have imagined. At that moment, a man in a dark suit appeared from the path nearby, walking toward the group. He moved with purpose, his steps measured and deliberate. He was tall, his posture straight, and there was something about him that commanded respect. His presence seemed to shift the energy in the air. His eyes locked onto Janelle as he approached, his face calm but intense. Janelle, not recognizing him, didn't pay much attention at first. She was still ranting, oblivious to the man who was now standing just a few feet away. "I mean, they'd die over there, and for what? A flag? A piece of land? It's all a waste," she scoffed. Without a word, the man stood in front of her, his silence louder than any words could have been. Janelle stopped mid-sentence, her eyes narrowing as she looked at him. The calmness in his eyes was unsettling. He didn't look angry, but there was something about him that made her uneasy. "Excuse me," Janelle said, her voice laced with confusion. "Can I help you?" The man didn't answer right away. He just stood there, looking at her with a steady gaze, almost as if he was waiting for something. The silence stretched for a few seconds, and by now, the people around them were beginning to notice the strange tension. Finally, the man spoke, his voice deep and clear. "You're talking about my son." Janelle blinked in surprise, not quite understanding what he meant. She opened her mouth to respond, but the words seemed to catch in her throat. The man continued, his voice calm but firm. "My son was a soldier. A black soldier," he said slowly, making sure his words hit hard. "And he gave his life for this country. For a country that you seem to disrespect so easily." Janelle felt her stomach drop. Her mind raced as she tried to process what he was saying. This man, his son. She had no idea who he was, but now she understood the gravity of the situation. The smugness she had been feeling moments ago was quickly replaced by embarrassment. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice shaking a little now. The man didn't flinch. "I'm the father of the man you've been belittling. The man you've been disrespecting with your words." The people around them had gone quiet now. Even those who had been hesitant to speak earlier were listening, fully aware of what was unfolding in front of them. Janelle, realizing her mistake, felt her face flush with humiliation. The words she had thrown out so carelessly had reached the wrong person, and now the truth was staring her in the face. The man continued, his voice not rising but carrying the weight of years of pain. "You don't know my son. You don't know the sacrifices he made. You don't know what it's like to lose someone like that. But you will, because I'm not going to let you get away with this." Janelle opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. The man turned and began to walk away, his back straight and proud, as if he was carrying the weight of an entire nation's history on his shoulders. But as he walked, he called over his shoulder, his words echoing in the still air. "Heroes aren't defined by their skin. They're defined by what they give. And my son gave everything. You should learn some respect." As the man disappeared into the crowd, Janelle was left standing there, her mind reeling. The shock of the moment left her speechless, her thoughts scattered. She had never expected anything like this, never imagined that her careless words would lead to such a confrontation. And as the crowd slowly began to disperse, the impact of the man's words lingered in the air, heavy and undeniable. Janelle would never forget this moment, not just because she had been humiliated, but because something inside her had shifted. The father's unexpected words. The park remained quiet after the man walked away. Janelle stood frozen, her body stiff and her mind racing. She had never thought her words could have such an impact, especially not with someone like him. She glanced around, hoping someone would speak up and say that the man was overreacting. But no one did. Instead, the crowd remained silent, watching her as if waiting for her to respond, but the words wouldn't come. The reality of what had just happened started to settle in. The more she thought about it, the more ashamed she felt. This wasn't just some stranger. This was the father of a fallen soldier. A black man who had sacrificed his life for his country. And Janelle, in her arrogance, had disrespected him and his son without a second thought. As the days passed, Janelle couldn't stop thinking about that moment. She had tried to shake it off, telling herself that the man was being too sensitive. But deep down, she knew that wasn't true. His words had stuck with her, and for the first time, she started to see the world from a different angle. She couldn't ignore the truth he had spoken. Heroes aren't defined by their skin. They're defined by what they give. The park was still fresh in her mind, and now she found herself questioning everything. She had heard stories about soldiers, but never had she truly stopped to think about the sacrifice they made. And as the days passed, Janelle began to feel more and more guilty for the way she had spoken about them. But it wasn't just about the soldier anymore. It was about how blind she had been to the real meaning of sacrifice. Her thoughts were interrupted one afternoon when she saw something on the news. A local station reported about the soldier, the man whose father had confronted her in the park. His name was Marcus Carter, a young man who had enlisted in the military at 18. The report detailed his service, his dedication, and his untimely death in a foreign country while fighting for a cause he believed in. Janelle sat down in front of the television, unable to tear her eyes away from the images of Marcus. He was young, just a few years older than her own brother. The reporter talked about how Marcus had grown up in a small neighborhood, raised by his father after his mother passed away when he was just a child. She heard about his dreams, his hopes, and how he had always wanted to make a difference in the world. Marcus's story wasn't just about his death. It was about a life lived with purpose. Janelle's heart tightened in her chest as she listened to the report. How could she have been so careless? Here was a man who had given everything, including his life, for the very country she had mocked. The shame she felt was overwhelming. Her words in the park now felt like daggers. The father, Mr. Carter, was interviewed briefly. The reporter asked how he felt about his son's legacy and the sacrifices he made. Mr. Carter spoke softly, but there was strength in his voice. "My son believed in something bigger than himself," he said. "He didn't care about the color of his skin. He cared about doing what was right, and he paid the ultimate price for that. Janelle's mind replayed those words over and over again. He didn't care about the color of his skin. How foolish she had been to reduce Marcus's sacrifice to something so small, to see it through the narrow lens of her own ignorance. She had been so focused on the wrong things, so wrapped up in her own anger, that she had failed to see the bigger picture. By the end of the report, Janelle felt a deep, aching guilt that she couldn't shake. It was as if the man in the park, Marcus's father, had forced her to face a mirror and see herself for what she truly was, a woman blinded by her own prejudices, unwilling to recognize the depth of what she had said. The more she thought about Marcus and the conversation with his father, the more Janelle realized how important it was for her to make things right. She didn't know how to fix what she had done, but she knew she had to try. Her guilt drove her to do something she never thought she would do. She went to the cemetery where Marcus was buried. She didn't know if it would help, but it felt like the only way she could show respect for the man she had so wrongfully belittled. When she arrived at the cemetery, it was quiet and peaceful, the kind of place where time seemed to stand still. Janelle stood by the gravesite, feeling the weight of what she had done. She hadn't come to look for forgiveness, nor did she expect to find peace. But in that moment, as she stood there alone, she realized that Marcus's sacrifice wasn't just about him. It was about the strength of his family, his father, and all the people who loved him. "I'm sorry," Janelle whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry." It wasn't much, but it was a start. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew that she had learned something important, that words mattered, that respect was earned, and that sometimes we needed to look past our own biases to understand the true meaning of sacrifice. A guilt-ridden apology. The days following Janelle's visit to the cemetery were a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. As much as she wanted to move on, her mind kept returning to the man and his son, Marcus Carter. She couldn't stop thinking about the confrontation at the park, and the chilling realization that her words had hurt not only the man she had met, but an entire family who had already experienced so much pain. She went through her daily routine mechanically, but it was as if everything around her had changed. The way she viewed people, especially the soldiers who risked their lives, was no longer the same. The understanding that she had failed to respect those who fought for freedom hit her hard, and she couldn't escape the weight of her mistake. Janelle couldn't shake the thought that she needed to do more than just apologize in her own mind. She needed to reach out to Marcus's father, Mr. Carter, and tell him how truly sorry she was. But how could she face him after everything she had said? She had belittled his son, his sacrifice, and his life's work with no consideration. Janelle feared that no apology could ever make up for the pain she had caused. Yet, deep down, she knew she had to try. It wasn't enough to just feel sorry. She had to show him. She needed to right the wrongs that were caused by her ignorance, even if it felt impossible. After several days of hesitation, Janelle finally gathered the courage to write a letter. It wasn't something she did often, but she knew that in this case, it was the most sincere way to express her feelings. She wrote with honesty, pouring out her guilt and regret onto the page. "Dear Mr. Carter, I don't expect forgiveness, and I don't deserve it, but I owe you an apology. The words I spoke in the park were wrong, disrespectful, and hurtful. I spoke without thinking, without considering the pain that soldiers and their families go through every day. I was blinded by my own ignorance, and I deeply regret it. I now realize that Marcus's sacrifice was not just for himself, but for all of us. I will never be able to understand fully what you and your family have gone through, but I want you to know that I am sorry. I disrespected your son, and the honor he gave to this country, and for that, I will forever feel ashamed." Janelle sat silently, the letter in her hands, her heart beating faster as she read Mr. Carter's words. He had forgiven her. Slowly, but surely, he had forgiven her. She felt a weight lift off her shoulders, and for the first time in what felt like ages, she smiled. It wasn't a perfect resolution. She knew that she couldn't change the past. But what mattered now was that she had learned, and that she had taken the first steps toward understanding the real value of sacrifice. In the end, that was what truly mattered, a gesture of redemption. Janelle couldn't stop thinking about the letter from Mr. Carter. His words had brought her a sense of relief, but they also made her realize something she hadn't fully understood before. Respect, forgiveness, and redemption were not earned through words alone. They were built through actions, through sincerity, and through making a real effort to change. Janelle knew that writing the letter had been a step in the right direction, but it wasn't enough. Mr. Carter's response had given her hope, but it had also reminded her that simply apologizing wasn't enough to fully make up for what she had done. If she truly wanted to honor Marcus's memory and prove that she had learned from her mistake, she needed to show Mr. Carter and the world that her transformation was more than just a promise. Her first thought was to visit Marcus's grave again. After all, that was where her journey of self-awareness had begun. But this time, she wouldn't just stand there and feel guilty. She wanted to do something meaningful, something that would show respect, not just to Marcus, but to all the fallen heroes like him. Janelle spent the next week planning. She researched ways to support soldiers and veterans, to give back in a way that would be meaningful. Through her research, she found an organization that supported the families of fallen soldiers, providing financial assistance and emotional support. She reached out to them, asking how she could contribute. They told her about a program where volunteers could sponsor events for families of soldiers, or even donate to create educational scholarships for the children of fallen heroes. Janelle immediately knew what she wanted to do. She decided to dedicate a day to raising awareness and funds for the organization. But she didn't want to just make a donation. She wanted to be part of something bigger. She wanted to honor Marcus and the legacy of every soldier who had made the ultimate sacrifice. It wasn't much, but it felt like the right thing to do. The day of the event arrived, and Janelle felt both nervous and determined. She had invited a group of friends and family members to join her, knowing that this wasn't just about her. It was about spreading awareness. She stood at the front of the community hall, where the event was being held, with a table filled with flyers, donation boxes, and stories of fallen soldiers, including Marcus. The turnout was better than she had expected. More people showed up than she could have imagined, many of them eager to contribute and learn more about the cause. Janelle gave a short speech, her voice shaky but sincere, as she shared her own story and the lessons she had learned. She talked about how easy it was to be ignorant, how quickly she had dismissed the sacrifices of others, and how she now realized how much more respect and honor was owed to those who fought for the freedom everyone took for granted. As Janelle looked out at the crowd, she could see the recognition in their eyes. Some of them had family members in the military, and others had known fallen soldiers. She could see that the sincerity of her words had made a difference. People were donating, signing petitions, and offering their time. It was clear that the event was having an impact. But as the evening wore on, Janelle kept looking for Mr. Carter. She had invited him to come, hoping he would be there to witness her attempt at redemption, to see that she had changed. But he hadn't shown up, and that thought lingered in her mind. Finally, as the event was winding down, Janelle's phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. She opened it and saw that it was from Mr. Carter. "Janelle, I heard about the event today, and I want you to know that I'm proud of you. You've come a long way since that day in the park, and what you're doing now is a true testament to the change you've made. It's easy to say sorry, but it takes a strong person to show it through action. Keep going, and keep honoring Marcus and all the others who gave everything. Take care, Mr. Carter." Janelle's eyes welled up with tears as she read the message. It wasn't just the words that moved her. It was the acknowledgement that what she had done had been noticed, that it mattered. Mr. Carter had seen her efforts, and that meant the world to her. For the first time in a long time, Janelle felt a sense of peace. She knew that her journey wasn't over, but she had taken an important step. She had started to make up for her past mistakes, and she was on a path to becoming a better person. As Janelle packed up the last of the supplies from the event, She reflected on how much had changed. Her life, once consumed by her ignorance, had become something richer, something more meaningful. She had learned the true value of sacrifice. And with that knowledge, she could finally honor those who had given their lives for others. But most of all, Janelle had learned that redemption wasn't about perfection, it was about progress. And she was on the right track. The ripple effect of change. The days following the event were filled with a new kind of energy for Janelle. She was no longer simply reflecting on her past mistakes. She was actively making a difference. The event had not only been a success, but had also ignited a spark in others. Several people who attended reached out to her afterward, sharing their own stories of loss and sacrifice. Many of them had family members in the military, some of whom had made the ultimate sacrifice. Through their conversations, Janelle realized just how deep the impact of her actions had become. What surprised Janelle the most was the ripple effect. She had expected to learn from the experience, but she hadn't anticipated how much she could influence others by simply speaking up and showing respect. People who had once stayed silent about their own loved ones' sacrifices were now sharing their stories. Conversations about soldiers and their families began to pop up in her everyday life, not just in the events she hosted but in casual conversations with friends and family. Janelle had become a catalyst for change, and it was humbling. One afternoon, as Janelle sat at her kitchen table, she received another text message, this time from her sister, Maya. Maya had always been supportive, but she knew that Janelle hadn't been the same person for a long time. She'd seen her sister struggle with guilt over her past actions, and she had watched her work hard to change. But Janelle hadn't fully understood just how much her transformation had affected others until now. Janelle, I've been thinking about you a lot lately. I wanted to tell you how proud I am of you, not just for apologizing to Mr. Carter, but for taking the steps you've taken to make up for your mistakes. I saw how many people at the event were touched by your words, and I saw how much you've grown. It's amazing to see the impact you've had on others, and I'm especially proud to see you finally at peace with who you are now. Keep going, sis. The world needs more people like you. Love. Tears filled Janelle's eyes as she read the message. It was clear that Maya had seen something in her that Janelle hadn't fully realized herself. She wasn't just on a journey of redemption. She was becoming a beacon of change for those around her. She had inspired her sister and others to reflect on their own actions, to think deeply about how they treated others, and to be more mindful of the sacrifices people make. Despite all the progress she had made, Janelle knew her journey wasn't over. She was learning to be more compassionate, more respectful, and more understanding of the world beyond herself. But there was still more work to be done. She had learned so much about herself, but there were still others out there who had yet to experience the same kind of transformation. As Janelle continued her work with the organization supporting fallen soldiers and their families, she found herself growing more involved. She wasn't just attending events anymore. She was helping to organize them. She was mentoring others who had been through similar experiences, encouraging them to use their voices to honor those who had been lost. She was becoming a leader in her community, but it wasn't the kind of leadership she had once dreamed of. It wasn't about being in the spotlight or seeking approval. It was about using her voice and her platform to make the world a little better. One day, after a particularly emotional memorial event, Janelle received an unexpected call. It was from Mr. Carter. She had kept in touch with him over the past few months, occasionally checking in to thank him again for his forgiveness and to update him on the events she had been organizing. Janelle, Mr. Carter's voice was calm, but there was something deeper behind his words. I wanted to call you and let you know that Marcus's mother and I have been talking about what you've been doing. We both want to thank you for all your efforts. You've truly honored our son and all the soldiers who gave their lives. What you've done is more than just words, it's action. Janelle's heart swelled at his words. To hear such genuine appreciation from someone who had been hurt so deeply by her actions meant more than anything. It was proof that, despite everything that had happened, she had truly made a difference. Thank you, Mr. Carter. I can't tell you how much that means to me. I know I'll never bring Marcus back, But I will continue to honor his memory, and I'll continue working to help those who are affected by the same kind of loss. It's the least I can do." There was a pause on the line, and when he spoke again, his voice was softer, almost like he was talking to a friend. "I know, Janelle. I know. And I believe you." As Janelle hung up the phone, she sat in quiet reflection. She had come so far from the woman who had once disrespected Marcus's sacrifice. She had learned that growth wasn't easy, and sometimes the path to redemption wasn't clear. But the journey was worth it. She had found purpose in her actions, and she had finally earned the respect she had once failed to give. But the most important lesson Janelle had learned wasn't just about being forgiven. It was about forgiving herself. For the first time in a long time, she felt whole again. A full circle of healing. Janelle had never imagined that her journey of self-discovery would take her this far. As the months passed, she continued to immerse herself in the work that honored soldiers like Marcus. What had started as a way to make amends had blossomed into something much greater. Her own healing was inextricably linked to the work she was doing, and with every event she organized, every life she touched, Janelle felt like she was building something meaningful, something that transcended her past mistakes. One evening, while sorting through some event materials in her living room, Janelle received a call that she never expected. It was from her old friend, Linda, who had been a part of her life before everything had changed. "Janelle, it's Linda. I heard about everything you've been doing lately. I wanted to tell you how proud I am of you. I know it hasn't been easy, but you've really turned things around. I've been thinking a lot about our conversations, about how we used to talk about things that didn't really matter, and how things like respect and sacrifice weren't always at the forefront of our minds. But you've really grown. You've shown all of us what it means to truly change." Linda's words hit Janelle in a way that she hadn't anticipated. It wasn't just the recognition of her work. It was the recognition of her inner transformation. For so long, Janelle had struggled with guilt and shame, unsure if her past mistakes would always define her. But now, hearing Linda's acknowledgement, Janelle realized how far she had come. The old version of herself, the one who had disrespected Marcus and thought little of the sacrifices made by others, was no longer who she was. She had done the hard work of changing, and now people who had once known her as a different person could see it too. "Thank you, Linda. That means so much to me. I never could have imagined this journey, but I feel like I'm finally living in a way that matters." They chatted for a while longer, catching up on old memories. But Janelle couldn't help but think about how much her world had shifted. She wasn't the person she used to be, and that was a good thing. She had embraced change, not just in her actions, but in her mindset. And she wasn't done yet. Janelle's phone buzzed again, this time with a text message from a number she didn't recognize. When she opened it, she saw that it was from someone who had attended one of the recent events she'd organized. The message was brief but powerful. "Hi, Janelle. I just wanted to thank you for everything you've done for the fallen soldiers' families. Your words really moved me, and I wanted to let you know that I'm doing more now to honor my own family's sacrifices. You've inspired me to do better. Thank you." Janelle smiled as she read the message. She had always known that her work could make an impact, but this was the first time someone had directly told her that she had inspired them to change. It was a humbling moment, and it reminded her of the reason she had started this journey in the first place, not just to make amends, but to spark a change in others as well. The next morning, Janelle sat in her car outside a local veterans memorial. It was a bright, clear day, and the air was crisp, signaling the arrival of autumn. She had come to visit Marcus's memorial once more, to reflect on how far she had come, and to offer her gratitude for the lessons she had learned through his sacrifice. She had been to this place many times since that fateful day in the park, but today felt different. Today, she felt a deep sense of peace. She got out of her car and walked slowly toward the memorial. The names of countless fallen soldiers were etched in stone, each one representing a life lost, but never forgotten. Marcus's name was there too, and as Janelle stood before it, she felt a profound connection to him. to all the soldiers whose sacrifices had gone unnoticed by so many. "I'm sorry, Marcus," she whispered, her voice steady but full of emotion. "I'll never be able to make up for what I did, but I promise to keep honoring you. Your legacy will live on through me, through all of us who are finally understanding what it means to sacrifice for something greater." As Janelle stood there, her eyes closed, a feeling of deep gratitude washed over her. She wasn't asking for forgiveness anymore. She had already begun to forgive herself, and that was enough. The work she had done, the people she had helped, and the community she had built were all part of a larger story that was bigger than her mistakes. It was about honoring those who had given their lives, and in doing so, honoring her own life's potential to do better. As she left the memorial that day, Janelle knew that she would continue to carry the lessons she had learned. She would keep using her voice for good, keep working to honor those who had sacrificed everything, and most importantly, keep growing. The journey of redemption wasn't over, but she was now walking a path of purpose, one that she knew would lead her to places she had never imagined. A legacy of honor. The sun was setting as Janelle walked back to her car, her heart full. She had come to the memorial one last time for closure, but it wasn't just the memorial that had given her peace. It was the entire journey she had undertaken over the past months. Every moment of self-reflection, every apology she had made, and every step she had taken to make amends had led her to this moment of clarity. As she got into her car, she glanced at the text messages she had received that morning. The one from Linda, her old friend, still filled her with warmth. Linda had been a part of her past, but it was clear now that she had a place in her future as well. It wasn't just about repairing relationships. It was about forging new, more meaningful connections. Janelle had learned that change wasn't an overnight process. It wasn't something you could rush or force. It was something that happened little by little, through every action, every decision, every time you chose to do the right thing. She had learned the hard way, but the lessons had stuck with her, shaping the woman she had become. That night, as Janelle sat down at her kitchen table to go over her plans for the upcoming memorial event, she received a message from Mr. Carter. She hadn't expected to hear from him again, but his words brought a smile to her face. "Janelle, I just wanted to say thank you once again for all that you've done. It's been a long road, but I see the change in you. It's not just about what you've done for us, but the impact you've had on everyone who's been around you. You've made a difference in ways that words can't describe. I know Marcus would be proud of you. We all are. Thank you." Janelle's hands trembled as she read the message. She had earned his respect, but this was more than she had ever hoped for. To know that Marcus's father, a man who had every right to resent her, now saw her as someone who had truly changed. Well, that meant everything. As the weeks went by, Janelle's efforts continued. Her work with veterans' families, her speeches at memorial events, and the connections she made with others who had been touched by sacrifice, all became part of a larger story. But she never lost sight of the reason she started all of this, to honor the memory of Marcus and all the others who had given their lives for the greater good. It was her way of saying, "I see you, and I will never forget." One day, during a memorial service, Janelle was approached by a young woman who had attended one of her events. The woman had lost her brother in the line of duty and had been deeply moved by Janelle's words. She had come up to thank her, but Janelle saw something in her eyes, something that spoke of a quiet pain. "Janelle, thank you for everything. You've made me realize that my brother's life wasn't in vain. I've been so focused on the pain of losing him, I forgot to honor his sacrifice. But you've reminded me that his legacy lives on in all of us who continue to remember him." Janelle listened intently, her heart aching for the young woman. She understood now more than ever that the pain of loss never really goes away, but honoring the memory of those we love, finding ways to keep their legacy alive, was the only way to heal. After the event, as Janelle sat in her car, reflecting on what had just happened, she realized how far she had come. She had found her purpose. She had finally taken the steps to not only make amends for her past actions, but to become a force for good in the world. Every apology, every act of service, every word spoken at those memorials was a step toward redemption, not just for herself, but for the countless others who had suffered in silence. Her journey wasn't just about honoring Marcus's sacrifice anymore. It was about honoring all those who had given their lives, and it was about making sure their memories stayed alive, for future generations to never forget. Through her words and actions, she had helped others heal, and in doing so, she had healed herself. Months later, as Janelle was preparing for another event, this time a national memorial gathering for soldiers who had died in the line of duty, she received an unexpected phone call. It was from a well-known media outlet, a journalist who had been following her story. He had heard about her transformation and the work she was doing in the community. He wanted to do an interview with her, to share her story of redemption and healing with the world. Janelle hesitated for a moment. Public recognition wasn't why she had done all this. It had never been about fame. It had always been about honoring the fallen heroes and their families. But as she thought about it, she realized that by sharing her story, she could inspire even more people to make a difference. She could help others see that no matter how deep the mistakes, no matter how far down a wrong path someone had gone, redemption was possible. And it was worth every step. "Yes, I'll do the interview," she said, her voice steady. "I want to share this story. I want people to know that change is possible, and that it's never too late to start over." That interview, broadcast nationwide, became a pivotal moment in Janelle's life. It didn't bring her fame or accolades, but it did open doors for even greater work. Her story inspired thousands of others who had been struggling with their own guilt, their own mistakes, and their own fears of never being able to make things right. Janelle's story became a beacon of hope, a testament to the power of change and the strength it took to face one's past and make it right. She had come full circle, from a woman who had disrespected the memory of a fallen hero to someone who had become a living tribute to that hero's sacrifice. The legacy of Marcus, and the many others who had died for their country, would never be forgotten, not as long as Janelle had a voice to speak. And she knew, deep in her heart, that she would continue to honor them every day for the rest of her life.